Hey, Making Digital Real podcast fans, it's Abby Jacks here from the Step to Success podcast, the podcast show where James Brooker and I talk to activity providers about growth strategies and provide marketing advice in bite-sized pieces. Check out episode 4 where I talk about the importance of knowing your target audience with a super quick workshop on how you can get all the info you need on them. You're listening to the Making Digital Real podcast with your host, Mike Roberts.
Hey everyone, it's Mike here from the Making Digital Real podcast. Great to have you with us. Today we have another special episode, and this is one of the first times where I've actually had a guest on the show. So I would like to welcome Andrea Liebross. Welcome, Andrea.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
So, Andrea, do you want to tell us a little bit about you and the business, and then we're going to go into the wonderful world of podcasting and how it's helped you?
Sure. So I live in the US and I work with female entrepreneurs really all over the world on helping them think bigger about their businesses and getting them to a place where it actually feels a little freeing and fun potentially, because that's probably why they got into having their own business in the first place, or one of the reasons. Probably the reason that brought them there is because they wanted to share something that they love to do and they have a passion, but they realized somewhere along the way that this was a business as well. And that can start to feel heavy and that can start to feel a little suffocating. So I am there to help them through that process. And I work with people who are, in the beginnings of their business, but I'm also working with people who've got a team of 100 people. So, they're in all different stages of business. And I also have a podcast of my own called She Thinks Big. And last year I released a bestseller book also called She Thinks Big. There's a very long subtitle too, but we don't have to get into that. If you Google She Thinks Big, you will find it. And I've started to, I've really been using private podcasting for a couple of years now too. So I'm happy to be here to chat about it.
Yeah, well, that is brilliant. So most of the listeners right now will have a great understanding of the world of podcasts. You open up Spotify or Apple, you search for something, it appears, you listen.
Great.
Job done.
Right.
Great. Wonderful.
Yes.
Not everybody has heard, especially here in the UK, of the private podcast world.
Yep.
So take us back to your journey about when this suddenly hit you and you thought to yourself, this is for me. When and where was this? What was going through your mind at the time, and where were you in business when this was happening?
So I started to use it for a very practical reason. And I only became familiar with it because I was working with someone who was using private podcasting. I think it's one of these things that's like, you've got to become exposed to it before you even understand what it is. So I was in a coaching program actually where there were, I forget, weekly calls, whatever it was, but I wasn't able to be on them all the time. And, yes, you can go back and watch the replay of a call. But for me, that just never seemed to happen. So once this person put those Zoom calls, actually just the audio portion, obviously, into a private podcast feed that only her membership could access, I really started consuming more of what I was purchasing, in a sense. It became an easier way for me to access the material. I could listen to it, while I was driving or doing dishes or whatever I was doing, right? It became much more accessible. So I have a coaching program and I have people that are listening and watching, and they're not always able to be on the calls either. So I started doing the same thing. I started putting my recordings of Zoom calls on Hello Audio, that's the private podcast platform I use. And I saw immediately I'll call it listenership went up. The material was being consumed more. And I've also then decided, all right, well, maybe I should use this as a lead magnet. Maybe people like to listen versus watch or download. So I created kind of a mini series, we'll call it, of podcasts that were only accessible if you had the specific link to the private podcast feed. So then that's kind of that was my next step. And I'm about to release my book in audiobook format next month. And I'm working on that whole launch process. And I think, I'm letting you in on a secret here. I think I am going to have some of the bonus content if you purchase the audiobook, in X number of weeks from it being released. You're going to get some bonuses, one of which is going to be like an annotated chapter from me in audio format. So yeah, so I find it personally, as well as for my clients, it's just an easier way to consume, and it's an easier way for me to make what I'm doing more accessible to them.
So there was a few things you touched on there about why and how private podcast feeds could be really useful. So I think we'll delve into those two I kind of spotted, okay?
Okay.
So the first one was, let's just imagine that you've got a group coaching call where people are on a Zoom call, for example. Not everybody can make it, but there are going to be things inside that particular coaching call session that might just be absolute gold, absolute brilliant nuggets of information.
Yes.
And we also know that a lot of people now have screen fatigue. Not many people nowadays want to have to sit in front of a screen, in front of a load of faces to consume their content necessarily.
Correct.
So you're taking the audio from these coaching calls so that they don't disappear into a black hole after the event's done. And they are there as a private podcast feed for your inner community to access, whether they be at the airport, on a plane, driving, doing the dishes.
Yes, that's what's happening. So, and I've been starting to use AI a little more and record my Zoom calls on using Fathom. So that makes it even easier too to say, hey, go to minute 15 on the private podcast feed and specifically make sure you listen to this. So that's even been another way to kind of layer on how to use that private podcast feed.
And the second thing that I heard you mention was you've got an audio book. So you've got a book, i.e. an audio book, which is for sale. It's a revenue generator, but bonus content for all those people that have bought it. Head over here, or give us your name and email address on some landing page, and we're going to give you a special bonus chapter or some information that you don't get, but it's a thank you for being part of our community and purchasing the book.
Correct. And I also know those people already like audio, right? Because they're purchasing an audio book. So why not give them more audio, right? Why do I need to give them more? I don't want to give them written format. They're more audio people. They specifically chose that. So
it's so cool. And I think if we drill down to the very basics here, there may be still a lot of people listening who are still thinking, well, why would I have it as a private podcast feed? And I think we have to remember, we're collecting names and email addresses for people to access this content. You're building a database. You're nurturing that database, which you don't necessarily get with a public podcast. You might have 100 listeners, but you don't know who they are.
Correct.
If you want to know who they are, a private podcast feed, either on its own or on the side to your public one, may just be a brilliant lead magnet generator so you can build up that database.
Exactly. So I think that's it's almost like you've got to listen to your audience in a sense and see how do they like to show up, what works for them, and why not if audio is what works for them, why not give them more of it, but also make it beneficial for you in the sense that you're collecting their name and email so you can reach them at a later date. Because that is one, I don't want to call it negative because there's not too many negatives of podcasting here, but when your podcast is out there as something public, you don't necessarily know who your listeners are, right? I mean, they're just numbers. It's just stats you've got. So this is a way to actually know who they are.
That is absolutely brilliant. So how can people, or the listeners, find your content? And if they want to listen to your podcast, where should they be going to?
So they can go to Apple or Spotify or any of their favorite podcast players, public podcast players, and put in She Thinks Big, Andrea, then it usually you will be able to find it. You can also go to I've got kind of a general link, Andrea's with an S, links with an S, andreaslinks.com. And there you're going to find a link to the podcast, a link to the book, a link to my website, a link to my social, all the things. And also a link to a quiz that is going to help you assess where you are in business.
Great. And I'm guessing you can work with anybody. Hence, you're talking to me here in the UK. You've got a worldwide audience right now.
I do.
You'll work with anyone.
I do. And I think that's another great thing about podcasting and audio is that your audience is worldwide. So, yes.
Brilliant. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for joining me on the episode today. My episodes are quite short, but before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to say to our audience or tell them about what's happening in your world or give them any insight into what's coming up?
Sure. I think a message that I really love to share is that being an entrepreneur is a journey, really a journey in personal development disguised as an entrepreneurial adventure. So, if we're talking about private podcast feed, this is probably maybe pushing you out of your box a little bit. It's helping you grow and look at new things. And I think that's really what being an entrepreneur is all about.
Yep, 100%. Thank you, Andrea. And thank you for so much for being a guest. And to all the listeners out there, we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the Making Digital Real podcast. I'm an AI voice, and this is going to be a topic in an upcoming episode. In the meantime, if you'd like to work with Mike on your brand new or existing podcast project, just get in touch.